So I'll go ahead and start recording just so we can share this out later. This was actually a kind of a fun exercise for me to do of kind of looking back over the last year of what we've done here at Reynolda. It's been an exciting year. Could have done without the pandemic, but it actually has been, in some ways, I would say the pandemic helped us with certain things because it made us pause. And let's see, everyone's seeing my screen online. Okay, making sure, and I just got to make sure on those. You know, the pandemic definitely made us pause certain things and reflect on what we were doing. But you know, doing this talk right now with Thanksgiving later on this week is perfectly timed because we are very thankful for everyone that supported us, from, you know, our friends of the Reynolda Gardens to supporters who kind of back some of these crazy ideas that we started coming up with. It's been a fantastic year. We've gotten, I would say, a lot done. And I think anyone that's been walking out here has seen some different things going on, whether it's in the formal gardens or if it's out on the trails. And this is kind of a fun stroll through this. And all of this started, I would say, I look back and it started end of September, beginning of October of 2020, where we had cobbled together, as I like to joke and say, some shovel-ready projects. And you know, at that point I'd been here, you know, coming up on almost 2 years. And it was things that I identified that we needed to do, and we needed upgrading, needed fixing, but it was projects that were going to start elevating Reynolda Gardens. And we pieced together this Grow with Reynolda Gardens kind of mini campaign. We kind of sometimes call it a runway to a capital campaign. And it was a mixture of different projects that originally started as 500,000, quickly went to 600,000. And as Stephen Dragasek, who's head of development for Reynolda House and Reynolda Gardens, he knows me. I keep coming up with new things. He's always scared when I call him. But what was fantastic was, I think everything has been timed right, where people have been coming out to Reynolda Gardens more so with the pandemic. This has been the place where you escape. This has been the place where you try to make sense of things, reconnect with families, or just get away from it all. You know, it's a place to run from Zoom. You know, because I think we all need that right now, and I think we've gotten a greater understanding of how important green spaces are. I had a conversation with someone yesterday, and her son-in-law is from France, and he was talking about they didn't have anything like this that's free and open to the public. Which kind of surprised me, but we've got it, and it's a great resource. And what was fantastic is the community started responding, and you know, we started having these conversations, like I said, probably more October of last year. And one of the first projects that kicked off was taking a look at, we knew we needed to reshingle all the tea houses in the upper formal gardens. And what you can see in the photo, you can see 4 of the 5 tea houses with new roofs, and the tea houses are the 5 structures that separate the lower formal gardens from the upper gardens, where the vegetables are and where, you know, the modern roses are, and then the shelters are the 3 shelters that are up in the upper garden as well. And you know, we knew we needed to do these. My whole thing is, this is a design garden that you don't do half of them. You know, 2 of the roofs had been done maybe 5 years ago, but you know, we wanted to have them all matching. It's a little wonky if you've got this formal design and some things are fresh and some things aren't so fresh. So with the help of Wendy and Mike Brenner, which, you know, we're so thankful for their support, and Wendy has become I think I would say a dear friend, and you know, having her in my corner cheering, they helped us start this project, which involved all the shingles coming off those tea houses, fresh cedar. I can never pronounce this. Cedar shingles. Say that 3 times fast and you'll see my difficulty. But all new roofs. We had fantastic help from Wake Forest University. J.L. Bolt and his team did all these roofs. They did a fantastic job. They came in and started, fixing that. Then we had a team that came in and started cleaning up and repainting the tea houses. And as this was going on, we're looking at the space and it's going, okay, we need to, you don't do part of the space, and because it never fails that you get one area cleaned up and everything else that isn't cleaned up stands out even more so. So I went back and was looking at the original plans for this area around the tea houses, and this surrounds the Lion's Head Fountain. And it just struck me as this area feels very strange. And I want you to really look at this photo. And in the background, you can see the boxwood is almost up, it's above almost the top of the arbor. It was extremely tall. And then the boxwood hedge you can see on the right was a little bit smaller. And it felt like this was kind of strange that something was lacking. And when I started looking at the plans, yes, something was lacking. There was supposed to be planted beds on either side of the pathway that goes through the arbor. So, we started taking a look at this and made some decisions to start doing some clearing. We took that old boxwood hedge out, the smaller one. It wasn't as necessarily congruent with the boxwood hedge that runs the whole perimeter. And this one had been in wet soils, so it wasn't the healthiest thing. And it was like, well, this is an opportunity. So that boxwood hedge came out. We then started diving in a little deeper, and I mean, really, I would say clean slate. We removed everything, and we did a lot of soil work, which, if you know me, I give the example, you don't build a house and go cheap on the foundation. Same thing for a garden. Your soils are what your garden is success. It's either, it determines whether your garden's successful or not. So we went in there, we piled lots of permatil, really, aerated the soils, worked on them. Like I said, that boxwood hedge came out. And then if you look in this photo, if you can see that bed below the wall, the majority of that is an iris that we actually sold at the plant sale. It's an iris insata, or Japanese water iris, that had pretty much dominated the entire landscape around the Lion's Head Fountain. It had choked everything else out. So, like I said, we're not going to do this, only halfway. So even the lower beds got cleaned out, and we started prepping that soil and started working on it. And I looked again, I always refer back to the historical plans as a guide, not the Bible and the law, but as a guide of what we should do. And I looked at the bulb plantings that were actually called for in the tea houses. And it's one of those things of going, I don't know in 1917 if bulbs weren't just as available as they are now, but where, say, Sears might call for 100 bulbs, I did 1,000. It's one of those things of if 100 crocus is nice, 1,000 are even better. But we ended up putting 9,000 bulbs in those pathways around the tea house. And it was an arduous process. My horticulturalist, Forrest Allred, was very methodical getting these laid out, and we got them planted. And this spring, we saw something in those tea houses that we hadn't seen in a long time. And that was an explosion of grape hyacinth. There were some white anemones in there. On the other side of the pathway is Kynodoxa, or Glory of the Snow, another little minor bulb that's blue. We incorporate, now my addition was this pink tulip called Lady Jane. And it's a tulip that is perennial. It will come back every year. It's not like the Dutch ones that, pretty much we treat as expensive annuals. This one, what I love about it, not only that it comes back, is in the morning and in the late evening when it's closed, it's pink. And then when the sun comes out, it opens up and it's brilliant white. It's a beautiful bulb. Definitely, it might be difficult at this point in the year to try to track it down. But it's Lady Jane tulip. And again, it's a favorite of mine. And if anyone's asking questions, just put them in chat and I'll try to circle back to them. But again, this is what it looked like before. Completely empty. I asked the staff when the last time they remembered things being in there, and they kind of scratched their heads. So like I said, you look at the boxwood hedge on the right, it's almost up to the arbor. Another project we worked on over the summer was, I had finally found in one of the cultural landscape reports, I tell people this was my eureka moment, was I found a line that said the boxwood hedge is to be trimmed at 4 feet high by 3 feet wide. And it's like, thank you. I find that, and we actually made a guide out of PVC tube that stands 4 feet high and has a T-bar on it that's 3 feet wide. So we can start bringing the boxwood hedge back into where it should be. And you can see in this, all of a sudden it started opening things up. And it felt claustrophobic in those areas before we cut the boxwood hedge back. But, starting to bring the boxwood hedge back into place allowed us to look at doing some annual plantings. This does deviate from the historical plan a little bit, but one of the things he had in Thomas Sears had in there was Vinca minor, which is something that we consider as a invasive these days. So that's always a no-no for me of going, nope, not putting that back there. So right now we'll probably continue to do some of these summer annuals. This past year we did dragon wing begonias and angelonia, which, those are bulletproof annuals. We are actually, believe it or not, thinking about our summer plantings right now. So I got to figure out what combination I want to do there for this coming year. But it really, going from that empty pathway and claustrophobic to opening things up and getting a lot of light back in there, it was pretty dramatic. And so that was going on as they're painting the tea houses, as all this work is happening. And part of this project was going in there and the walls in the garden getting cleaned up, repaired where they had cracks or anything, and repainted. And you can see it here where this was just shortly after I think they had been painted. And we had some of those wonderful breaks in the weather. I had to think back and go, that's right. Winter of 2020 and 2021 was extremely wet. We kept getting rain, which was a joy to tackle projects. But, look at the wall in this photo, that nice bright white, and then look at it in this one, and that's what it was. And what's been great is as these projects started happening and you can see the results, is my staff, which are invaluable, they started seeing results and they started going, wow, and it has spurred everyone on to doing more and taking on more and seeing this vision of we are going to make this garden shine. And we've done some changes throughout the garden where, I look at where there was Japanese holly in certain areas and it was pruned upright. And I'm like, well, Japanese holly, it's a boring evergreen. Well, we found a camellia that grows upright. So now we have basically the same form, but we've added some white flowers in fall for the garden. So, this is kind of what it looks like now. Bright and shiny white. So this was a great project to get us moving. And then at the same time, and this kind of, I don't know how I managed this last year, but this was the showstopper last year, was looking at what was this is the view of the East Garden, that really from what it was, originally it used to have perennial borders in there on either side, even perennial beds in the lawn. After Katharine had passed away, Sears came back and simplified it because they wanted to reduce maintenance. So all the perennials came out. So it was just cherry trees and pachysandra. So I make a habit of looking at not only where we've been, but where do we want to go. So when we started tackling this project, we were like, well, we know we need to replace the cherry trees because out of the 44 cherry trees that were supposed to surround the lower formal garden, there were 8 large cherry trees left. The rest were of varying small height. So the design element was lost. We wanted to add electricity. So, we need infrastructure if we want to have a grand vision of where the garden goes. Well, you also have to think about pipes underground, which is not the easiest thing to try to fundraise for. But again, cleaning up those walls, because this is what inspired us. This is a photo back from 1941 of the cherry tree alley, and I mean, full glory. And I can't wait for this to happen again here. And, we've laid the groundwork for this. We've also laid the groundwork for some challenges because even documented in some of the letters, they talked about the additional security they would have to hire for the garden because so many people would come to see the cherries. And we've kind of seen, we love the increased traffic of the gardens, and we love having more people coming here and discovering Reynolda. It does bring its own challenges of we have to adapt to more foot traffic in the garden. So it's getting harder and harder to keep grass nice and pretty and green. So we may have to look at other solutions. But looking at this inspiration, again, you can see in this photo, if you look in the lower formal garden on the right, you can see the kind of white images of the big cherries that were left. Like I said, 8 out of 44 were left. And then the remaining ones were, as you can see in this photo, on the far left, on that image on the right, you can see almost a small tree going up to one of the big cherries. So, the whole design element where you're supposed to have matching trees was lost. In some areas, we didn't even have them. So on November 20th of last year, we had David Luss come in, and, originally when I told him I wanted to cut down the cherry trees, he looked at me like I was crazy. I assured him that no, I was not, and that after explaining what the vision was, his team, which are fantastic, they came in and they got the cherries out. They got everything brought down to stumps, which allowed us to then shortly after, I think it took 4 days total. This is what the East Garden was looking like with the cherry trees gone. We kind of caught our breath and just took it all in for a minute. And then the next week, they were gone, including all the Pachysandra, which, one thing I point out to people is Pachysandra is related to boxwood. It's a host plant for boxwood blight. And we had a lot of Pachysandra in full sun, which is never going to look good. Leaf just dropped from the ceiling. I don't know if that was a sign, if it was a ghost of a cherry past. But so we took all the old Pachysandra out, all the old stumps out, got down to our soil, and got it ready, and brought in completely new soil. So it was a combination of permatil, which anyone who comes and hears me talk, I espouse the benefits of permatil. It's a it's a cooked slate product. So it's heated to a high temperature. They cool it quickly. It pops like popcorn. It's really lightweight. You incorporate it in soil. Your soil is not going to compact. It drains well. It does a lot of good things. It's not the cheapest thing in the world, but it's an investment. It'll never go away. So here we are looking, December 10th of last year, all new soil waiting for the next phase. And later on that day, the next phase showed up. This was the first truck of cherries. What was supposed to have been 2 tractor trailer loads ended up being 5. It was a difficult process. Some communication issues with the nursery where we were supposed to be getting, certain size trees, and we didn't. But we got through it. I'm healing. Some therapy has helped, but we got all the cherry trees in. We had the fantastic support of Piedmont Carolina Nursery. Mark Peters and Miles Peters, they were able to pivot and adjust to bigger cherries than we planned, which not necessarily is a bad thing. But we got all 44 cherries in right before, well, we got almost all of them in except for the last load by December 23rd. And so that's, of course, talking about the East Garden, but also looking over on the west side of the garden. And it almost immediately, we have a tunnel of cherries on the west side already. And again, while all this is going on, we're getting ready to start laying in electrical, new irrigation, all those, fun things to tuck underneath the ground. And thankfully, we got all this done right before wedding season. It was getting a little scary at times. And we were ready for spring. And this was, after the new turf came in, it looked beautiful. As I said, increased traffic has been a challenge. So I'm going to reach out to NC State with their turf science department to see if there's any solutions that involve turf, or if we need to start thinking outside the box. But I mean, the cherries were a hit this spring. They really were. The only frustrating thing was our timeline was having that orange construction fencing to keep people off the new turf. which I've learned that I needed deer fencing, which was 10 feet tall, because we did have some challenges of people still wanting to go onto the turf. But we got through it, and all the cherries got in. And in the summer, with the help of Chip Calloway, he introduced us to the phrase blousy borders. So, as I mentioned before, in the East Garden, these used to be perennial borders in there. Then it went to Pachysandra. So we're kind of middle ground. So we created these borders that have 3 different types of hydrangea paniculata. So there's limelight hydrangea, there's little lime, and then another one called quickfire. So those all have varying bloom time, so it extends the bloom time. We also have 2 different viburnums in there. There's Chinese snowball viburnum, which will bloom in spring and rebloom a little bit in the fall. And then an evergreen one called moonlight lace. And then I started sticking in a lot of fragrance. So I got bulbs ordered of a whole bunch of tuberose, fragrant gladiolus, lilies, crinum. So these are all interspersed throughout the shrubs. So we've got some fragrance throughout the space, which is an important thing where, if you aren't adding fragrance into a garden, you are completely missing an opportunity. So, what's been nice is seeing the East Garden really, people were really happy with how it looked. And of course, as gardeners, we all know that the old phrase of sleep, creep, and leap. So the first year plants are going to sleep, the next year they'll start creep, and then leap, and you'll really see things take off. So next year, will be this coming summer will be even better. The year after that will be even better. So we're really excited about how that whole East Garden and the Cherry LA has really come along. But our focus wasn't just on the formal gardens. It's one of those things that I try to stress to people. Reynolda Gardens is not just 4 acres and a greenhouse. It's 130 more acres of this property, which is a 16-acre meadow. It's almost 2 miles of trails. Lake Katharine. So there's a lot more to it, and there's a lot more that needed attention. And if you look at this photo, you can see the erosion on the trails was I'm really surprised we didn't have that many injuries of how badly eroded it was. If you look on either side of the trail, that is almost 99% invasive plant material, which was a challenge because it's when you're standing looking at this whole bramble of what do you do? Well, you bring in a hammer. I reached out to Piedmont Land Conservancy. They gave me one of their better trail people who knows how to sculpt a trail, to work with getting water off the trail so we didn't have erosion. And he's done a fantastic job of sculpting these trails. That photo on the right is where we were seeing all that horrible erosion in the first photo. I brought in a company called that pretty much ground all the invasives down to the ground so we would have a fighting chance. And we've been working over the summer to keep spraying the English ivy, spraying the ligustrum, spraying all the horrible invasives, and just keep fighting them. It's not over, the battle's not over yet, but we have, we finally are getting a foothold in these areas. And the whole plan is to start replanting with natives. So I see, red buds are a favorite tree of mine. I would love to do almost every different variety of red bud that's out there, of all the different native ones. And I'd love to do them in a grove. So when spring comes, it's just this red bud explosion. And with, so a lot of the trail work, that was again by a supporter. That was Emily and her husband, Roethling. They were fantastic. And the Keshians, helped us with this work on the trails. And then we had another supporter, Nancy Neal Spencer, who understood, that there's always the pretty stuff, but you have to have the infrastructure. So this actually was a very exciting day for me. This is when we got the water tap, so we could add water into the upper part of the property. You can't plant things. I mean, we were trying to plant here and there some plants, but we had to fill up a water tank, drive it up there to water things. It's just not feasible. So we were able to finally get water up along Coliseum, and there is a pipe that now runs all the way around the meadow, goes into the woodland a bit, goes down the drive a bit with quick connect, so we can actually drive around, tie in. You can see here's one of my, this is an exciting photo for me. because it means I've got water, which means I can start planting. But where you see that little purple flag, that's one of our quick connects. So it's a way to tie into that water line real quick and water things, set up a tripod. So it gives us the ability to start doing more. And thankfully, this was a gardener that helped us. She understood you got to have water if you're going to plant. So that's going to allow us to continue to start planting those areas where we've mowed all the invasives down. And I'm picturing deciduous azaleas, some of our native azaleas, ferns, tiarella, all of our, really laying into having just a beautiful, vista as you walk around the property. And what's been exciting was, thanks to Brooke Reynolds and her foundation, which was just a dream and a vision, has already started coming to life. If you walk the trails up along Coliseum, where it parallels Coliseum Drive, that image is pretty much what it would look like after it rains. The trails were flooded, they would be muddy for a couple days. It was full of poison ivy, honeysuckle, every bad, character that you can picture in terms of invasives. And this is the front door of Wake Forest University and the front door of Reynolda, and it should not look that bad. And, even underneath the power lines, we had the utility butchering of trees, which did not look good. This was an area that stayed flooded. And, someone said, well, we can just pipe the water out into the meadow. And I said, yes, that's a solution. It's about as least imaginative as we can get. And I said, I have a different idea. And if you've walked under there and you've walked under those majestic bald cypress that are up there, it's almost magical when you go under these drooping branches. And I kept thinking about that. And I kept thinking, let's embrace the fact that it's wet. And so, I kept thinking about doing a boardwalk through this area. Nothing high, just barely off the ground, so we don't have to worry about being muddy in there. And let's really lean into the fact that this is a wet area of the property. I mean, we've got some majestic bald cypress up there. So first step, all the half dead and dying trees that were up in that area, they had to go. And I have, it's one of those things of going, I'm not an advocate for taking out trees unnecessarily, but when you have a vision of what you want to come back with. So we're cutting out those trees underneath the power lines, stepping out of their right of way and replanting more trees. So we got rid of, this was a half dead honey locust. There was a crab apple up there that never looked really happy. So all those came out. We had a clean palette to start working with. And, within just a little over a week, J.L. Bolt and his team with Wake Forest University started bringing my vision to life. So they have started on the boardwalk, where it's winding underneath those bald cypress. It's been fantastic to start seeing this happening. We'll start planting. I've recently come back from the Ralston Arboretum with a whole bunch of different Louisiana iris and some of the native irises that make up that whole complex hybrid group of plants. So, picture Louisiana iris, other water irises, more bald cypress. It's kind of like, if something works, let's lean into it. So I picture this grove of bald cypress that you'll walk under. And if you go on the eastern part of the state, you'll see where the bald cypress is. There's also one of our native palms, which is Sabal palmetto. We're going to plant a bunch of those up there. Beautyberry, Calicarpa, things like aronia, which is red chokeberry. So, planting for things that are going to provide food for wildlife. Maybe they'll focus on that and not my trees. But again, here were those trees on November 19th. This was early in the morning, and then looks a little cleaner. And knock on wood, it'll be done by end of December. That's hopefully it'll be done. So it's going to be a 300-foot long boardwalk through there. And I have a couple surprises that I'm going to add that I won't go into quite yet. Another project that we tackled was, again, this is the same concept as the cherries, where they were supposed to be 44 matching cherries. In the lower formal garden, there's 4 quadrants. There should have been a deciduous magnolia in every corner of every quadrant. So 16 magnolias minus 1 where the access ramp has been added. So we should have had 15 deciduous magnolias that all match. And we had 15 different sizes and 3 different colors, and some of them in really poor health, like this one on the right. Some were in phenomenal health, which were towering over everything else, which was an interesting way of looking at, the garden has to change because Sears's plans all spec sun perennials. Well, we had a lot of shade in like the pink and white garden. You can see in this photo, there were some of these trees were large, but you can see there's, a dark pink, a light pink, and then this muddy white or muddy pink. It's just, to me, it was an ugly color. But if you've grown saucer magnolias, you also know that out of 10 years, you might get 3 years that you can avoid a frost and you actually get to enjoy them. Usually right when they start blooming, it hits 29, they turn brown and hideous. This past spring, they got hit twice. So they really got beat up. So just a few weeks, November 19th, again, we came in, all the old magnolias are gone. And what, this allows us to do is to come back with the original design intent of matching magnolias. And, this opens the garden up. So we'll it'll start back with more sun. These areas were completely shady because of the trees, but none of the plans, called for shade perennials. So it's kind of like you have to adapt. But what I'm happy to introduce is meet Lois. This is Magnolia Lois. It's a pale, almost creamy yellow. So they would all be matching. And the photo on the right was taken at the Ralston Arboretum last spring. And the Ralston's about a week and a half to 2 weeks ahead of us, almost as a given. So the timing on this should work, that when the cherries finish blooming, suddenly then the magnolias will kick in. So it's going to be, as I describe it to people, it'll be multiple crescendos through spring. You'll have the cherries taking center stage. They'll finish, then the magnolias, they'll finish, then bulbs. And that's kind of the vision of this is one of the steps in the formal gardens. Those were some of the big projects. And while all this is going along, we're doing things like the bulb display kept getting bigger and bigger. Sometimes unbeknownst to me, my horticulturalists, when they ordered 400 tulips and I placed the order, it was for 800. I did that on multiple occasions. So a lot more bulbs came. So really the bulb, display started getting better, starting adding, more and more foxgloves for the spring. They're just an easy thing to tuck in amongst, and they've been a hit. This was over in the blue and yellow garden where, Forrest did, I think, a phenomenal job last spring with the tulips. And we tried, one trick we try to do is you try to pick a single early and a single late of the same color. And that way you get an extended bloom period of your tulips. And then of course, we're finally done with the drainage project that happened 2 years ago. So we were really able to complete my vision of a bulb display along that upper walk. And I think this was timed perfectly because let's face it, last spring, we were really in the midst of the worst part of the pandemic where it just was bleak. And I think so many people found joy walking down this, looking at all the tulips and daffodils in bloom. And that's what brings me joy is being able to provide that for the community. So, that was all going on, other projects. This was a little pet project of mine. If you ever walk the trails where the old outdoor pool was, I'm really intrigued by this space of what it could be, but you really couldn't tell because it was extremely overgrown. So I went out with a hatchet and cut back all the abelias that were, huge and overgrown, pulled the ivy off the tree, really started mowing things down, and you could start seeing the old infrastructure, this wonderful stone wall that was completely buried in ivy. So it's starting to reveal this space again, so we can start thinking about what this could become. And that's one of my things along the trails is, we're not going to garden up 300 acres. There's just no way, or 130 acres. 300, that just gave me a heart attack. But it's to have little moments along the trails. So where the outdoor pool is, if we garden that up a little bit, where the wildflower garden is. But doing things like that, Michelle had fun creating these the bean and gourd tunnels, which were an absolute hit. Kids just loved walking through these. It was great because you could walk under the bean tunnel with a 5-gallon bucket and come out the other end with 32 pounds of beans. That was pretty much a week's worth of harvest in the bean tunnel gave us 32 pounds of beans. Yeah. Now the ones on the far right, those were the gourds, which those were just for fun. We did snake gourds and birdhouse gourds. We had fun with that, and I'm glad that we continued working with hope of sharing our produce with the community. It's important to me for us to be involved in the community. We also had one of the first female Eagle Scouts in the country chose us as her Eagle Scout project. She added this kiosk along the trails. So finally, we have a space that we can actually communicate with people who maybe aren't coming to the formal gardens, but they're using the trails. So then they start understanding the trails are part of Reynolda Gardens. That, hey, I love these trails. That's where I should direct, my support to. We kept building up the, the volunteer base. We're getting a little bit more organized with that because we need more volunteers. We need, as I tell my staff, it's going to be easier to bring more volunteers in than to us. We've got to work harder to get more funding to get a permanent position, but volunteers, it builds a sense of community. People get to know each other. We have volunteers that have been coming here for years. It's fantastic, and we can't do what we want to do without them. And there's a lot to come. Just this winter, the east-west axis that runs in the formal gardens that's primarily azaleas, both evergreen and deciduous azaleas. There used to be lilacs in there. So we're going to be bringing so everything gets reset. So it's another thing where you would have 4 and one would die, and I can't get another azalea to match the 4. So it's a good thing. In this photo, you can see there's no azaleas left in that left side. All of them have died. So, originally the deciduous azaleas here were Ghent azaleas bred in England, never probably saw 80 degrees in their life. So let's stick them in the South. So those probably were never very happy. And then when the renovation happened, deciduous azaleas had not caught as much steam as they have now, but they were the Northern Lights series, which again, not the happiest here. So what I did was I reached out to the gentleman that we get our deciduous azaleas for our fall plant sale. And I gave him the colors. I said, I need a pale pink, I need a white, I gave him a list of the colors. I said, you tell me what's the best to go in these areas. So we have a whole new suite of deciduous azaleas that were predominantly bred in like Alabama and Mississippi. So heat and humidity ain't gonna be a thing. They will be fine in this area. So we'll be redoing all the deciduous azaleas, looking at replacing the evergreen azaleas, some of which are in really bad shape. The pachysandra that's in full sun, that'll be a thing of the past. So all this will get redone, and that's thanks to Loy McGill did this in honor of Paul McGill, who was one of the first superintendents of Reynolda Gardens. So that'll be exciting. I just got kind of devastating news. I had an order of lilacs that I was getting ready to go up to Cleveland to go get. They're ones that were bred for low chill, so they would do fine here. The nursery's been sold and they are no longer moving any stock. So I'm scrambling to find another lilac source, but I will find a way. But we're also looking, and this is something, if you have an interest, definitely reach out to us. If you have a garden club or someone that wants to help get behind this, we are hopeful that next year we will be working on restoring and renovating the blue and yellow garden. And this is kind of similar to what we did in some of the other areas where we took the old stuff out, we really reworked the soil, adding permatil, raising the bed so there's good drainage, evaluating the plant list, some things that, creeping Jenny or, Vinca minor that are not necessarily the friendliest things in the environment, find suitable substitutes for those, but, do that in the pink and yellow as well. Get those gardens refreshed and just stellar. And then we were just so lucky and thankful of the support we got on the fundraiser that we had at the beginning of November, that this will be when you see this work starting, we're done in the formal gardens. And luckily this fundraiser raised a serious amount of money that will allow us to repair and replace the slate hardscape that borders the lower formal gardens that's in pretty bad shape. So that'll be kind of, I describe it, it's like the putting the molding on everything. It's finishing the job. And all of this leads up to an exciting project, and that is the greenhouse. We are starting the conversations now. We're working with a project manager. We have some initial estimates in. The old Lord and Burnham greenhouse will come back and be restored to its original architecture. I mean, it's a magical space as it is, but this is one of the few surviving Lord and Burnhams that's in a public setting. A lot of these were built for private estates. And we're one of the few examples of a private estate that's now public that has one of these greenhouses. And these were, I describe them, it's kind of like, think about IKEA. They were kits. So this was a giant kit. So we've been working on, bringing it back to the original. So if you look at the greenhouse now, the edges on the greenhouse are, straight edges, because curved glass is about $200 a square foot. Straight glass is about $10 a square foot. So, when the gardens were run by the biology department, it's a funding decision. Well, we want to bring back all the original architecture of the greenhouse. So bring back those curved edges, the elegance that was around there. The facades around the greenhouse have been changed. So those will go back to their original form. And what's great is we found out New York Botanical Garden actually has a complete set of the architecture plans for this greenhouse. All the Lord and Burnham documentation was gifted to New York Botanical Garden. So we have that as a resource, but we are already starting the process of getting this going, and hopefully in 2023 you're going to start seeing some amazing things happen. And the vision is, you have this architectural gem, and right now we use it to grow plants for our plant sales, and that kind of dovetails with what its original purpose was. It grew plants for the estate and for the gardens. But what we want to do is we want to add new greenhouses up by our garages that handle things like that, of growing plants for the plant sale, and having the orchids that aren't blooming, but turn the entire historical greenhouse into a display greenhouse that is just 5,000 square feet of, knock your socks off. And there's exciting things like the Triad Orchid Society is meeting here now. We're looking that their orchid show will happen in the greenhouse. So it's just, and I've got to admit, I've skipped over, other little projects that we've done here and there, like getting the little water or little fountain working again. But it's been, a tremendous year. It's been a lot of work, but we're very thankful that we've had supporters that have gotten behind us, that have really, stepped up and said, hey, I want to help you get these things done. And it's, in my mind, it's getting better and better. I do think that some grand things. I mean, the greenhouse is going to be extremely exciting to work on. I might be fully gray by then, but it's an exciting time. My staff is excited. They're pumped up about what is ahead of us, and we really can't wait to keep it moving. And we're thankful for everyone's support, from someone that's an individual member of the Friends group to someone that is donating a 7-figure gift. And if you're one of those, please reach out. But we are tremendously excited about what 2022 is going to bring to us. But I thank y'all for your attention, and definitely come out and see the gardens, because it's constantly changing. I think we just got 20 some bulb crates showed up yesterday from UPS. So we got a lot of bulbs to start planting. I know I've got 4,000 fragrant jonquils that we're going to plant in the East Garden. So if you're interested in becoming a volunteer, go to Reynolda.org, and there's a form where you can indicate, your interest in volunteering, and we'll get in touch with you. But definitely, if you've got ideas or just want to, ask what's going on, always feel free to reach out. And everyone have a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving. And with that, we will hopefully see you in 2022. And if you have ideas for other talks, we've got spring all lined up, but we're always open to hearing if there's topics you want to learn about or that we need to do. But I think it's going to be a fun lineup for spring, and we will be busy. Yes. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so everything. So we've just launched a new website that's Reynolda.org. So there's no longer Reynolda Gardens and Reynolda House as separate websites. They're now under one, and it's actually been really well received. We've been moving. The whole vision is to get us out of our silos, that Reynolda House and Reynolda Gardens can work so much better together as a, not as a, we've got hurdles, we're different financial institutions, we're trying to work through that, but we're not going to let that stop from, working with the educator in the house to do a natural dyes program in the garden. So things like that are happening. So that's why we have a shared calendar. Yeah, so it's I'm December 1st will be 3 years for me, and I'm a little amazed at how far along we are. I didn't think we'd be this far along, but it just pushes me to go even harder, which I think my staff cringes when they're like, you want to do more. But I've got a fantastic staff, and I couldn't do it without them. Got fantastic supporters. So again, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, we thank everyone for their attention, thank them for the support, and definitely come out and stroll the gardens and walk some turkey off next week. So y'all have a great one.